Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. So where do the current GOP candidates stand on Ukraine, and what do those stands tell us about the future of the Republican Party? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. Tucker Carlson featured a segment on his show last night where he asked every potential 2024 GOP presidential candidate to answer 6 key questions on the war in Ukraine. The questions were as follows. Is opposing Russia and Ukraine a vital American national strategic interest? What specifically is our objective in Ukraine, and how will we know when we've achieved it? What's the limit of funding and material you would be willing to send to the government of Ukraine? Should the United States support regime change in Russia? And given that Russia's economy and currency are stronger than before the war, do you believe that U.S. sanctions have been effective? And finally, do you believe the United States faces the risk of nuclear war with Russia? These are excellent questions, and they helpfully summarize much of what's at stake with our current policy towards Ukraine. How precisely is defending Ukraine a vital American interest? What's our objective in Ukraine? Are we going to demand Crimea back? How far are we willing to go in all of this? Very important questions that the legacy media has yet to even hint at asking, but Tucker did. And to their credit, virtually all of the declared and even non-declared candidates gave their answers, for the obvious exceptions of Nikki Haley and John Bolton, who were too busy being their repulsive selves. But for those who did respond, their answers evidenced a shocking disparity from the Republican political class in Washington, as Tucker pointed out. Among President Trump's answers, he said this, quote, like inflation and numerous other self-inflicted wounds and mistakes made over the past 2 years, Russia would definitely not have raided and attacked Ukraine if I were your president. In fact, for 4 years, they didn't attack, nor did they have any intention of doing so as long as I was in charge. In response to the question of whether he supports regime change in Russia, Trump said, quote, no, we should support regime change here in the United States. That's far more important. The Biden administration are the ones who got us into this mess in the first place. Trump repeatedly mentioned the risk of nuclear war if peace was not brokered immediately. Quote, both sides are weary and ready to make a deal. The meeting should start immediately. There is no time to spare. The death and destruction must end now. Properly executed this terrible and tragic war, a war that never should have started in the first place, will come to a speedy end. Then Florida Governor Ron DeSantis weighed in. Now, of course, DeSantis has yet to formally announce his candidacy, and I still believe he's going to be a part of the Trump-DeSantis ticket, which would absolutely unite the party. But what was so fascinating is that, to my knowledge, this was the very first time DeSantis actually spelled out his position on Ukraine. Here's a portion of what DeSantis' response was. Quote, while the U.S. has many vital national interests, securing our borders, addressing the crisis of readiness within our military, achieving energy security and independence, and checking the economic, cultural, and military power of the Chinese Communist Party, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them. The Biden administration's virtual blank check funding of this conflict for as long as it takes, without any defined objectives or accountability, distracts from our country's most pressing challenges. Dang, a territorial dispute. Kind of sounds like DeSantis has been watching this channel and the rise of Russia as a civilization state, and how Ukraine, particularly Eastern Ukraine, fits into the boundaries of that civilization. At the very least, DeSantis is clearly not a neocon. He's clearly distancing himself from McConnell and Graham and the War Party in Washington. He went on, quote, without question, peace should be the objective. The U.S. should not provide assistance that could require the deployment of American troops or enable Ukraine to engage in offensive operations beyond its borders. F-16s and long-range missiles should therefore be off the table. Their moves would risk explicitly drawing the United States into the conflict and drawing us closer to war between the world's two largest nuclear powers. That risk is unacceptable. And he went on to point out that Biden's policy of confrontation with Russia has only served to drive Russia and China closer together, and openly talk about a new post-globalist alliance that's redefining the international order. In other words, Biden is single-handedly, according to DeSantis, presiding over the dismantling of the liberal international order, and he has only himself and his dithering policies to blame. So very clearly, DeSantis is rejecting the neocon unipolar response and recognizing that we are indeed in a multipolar world where the United States has to recalibrate its international relations. We're not the only superpower in town anymore. But if you think that answer was amazing, wait until you hear this next one coming from someone you may never have imagined saying it. You're going to absolutely love it. You know what else you're going to love too? A t-shirt just like this one. But you gotta act fast, gang. Our merch store is getting a huge makeover. We got brand new designs coming into the Turley Talks merch store in the next month, and that means we need to make room. So if you want a cool shirt like this one, you need to click on that link below right now. All the top designs featured on the store.turleytalks.com site are limited quantity and won't be available for long. So make sure you click on that link below right now and grab one of these incredible designs for yourself or a fellow patriot and stand boldly for truth. Don't miss out on owning one of these amazing designs before they disappear forever. Click on that link below or go to store.turleytalks.com. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who has yet to formally announce herself, also provided Tucker with answers to those questions, and she observed something absolutely fascinating. Quote, "The United States has come to rely far too heavily on financial sanctions as a weapon of deterrence. Now, nations that hate America are consciously moving away from the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Sanctions against China, Iran, and Russia have bolstered the Russian ruble and enabled China to establish trade in Chinese money rather than in U.S. dollars." Again, it's like Kristi Noem's been watching our videos on de-dollarization. A post-globalist world, a multipolar world centered on the rise of civilization states, will inevitably have its own economic structure that will eventually bypass the U.S. dollar. That is, unless the dolts in D.C. get a grip and realize that we're moving into a very different world from the one run by neocons and neolibs. There were, of course, disappointing answers coming from the likes of Mike Pence and Chris Christie, who are just incurable neocons, but they have no possible path to the presidency, so they're just spouting off whatever their donors tell them to. But with serious candidates like Trump, DeSantis, and Noem, we're seeing a consistent break with the neocon wing of the Republican Party. The most viable candidates out there are openly rejecting the Romney wing of the GOP, and this is huge because we often talk in this channel about the difference between a nationalist populist right party versus a nationalist populist light party. That's an important distinction to make to understand the tension that's going on in our party right now. A populist right party versus a populist light party. So a populist right party is a MAGA, America First party from top to bottom, from bottom to top, right? The Patriot Party, as it were. On the other hand, a nationalist populist light party is a party that has a MAGA base and nationalist populist grassroots, but a neocon rhino establishment leadership. And so the key to fully taking over the party is, of course, capturing that leadership. The more our leadership embraces America First principles, the more the GOP becomes a full-fledged nationalist populist right party. And with these questions on Ukraine being answered here, all the top contenders for that leadership position are ready to transform the GOP into precisely that. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on why the U.S. banking system is breaking up. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.